My aunt left behind an $89 million estate, but with one condition that made the entire family go pale. This is a true story about a funeral that was expected to be solemn, but turned into the unraveling of sins buried for over 30 years. What would compel a powerful woman to leave behind her entire fortune, but with one single demand, that a letter be read aloud in front of the entire family? And when that letter was opened, every ounce of trust, reputation, and power the family had built came crashing down. This isn't just a story about inheritance. It's a verdict of conscience read aloud in the middle of a funeral. That morning, Catherine Hayes knelt by the rosebed, hands caked in soil, hair hastily tied, up the early sun, casting a soft golden hue across her slender shoulders. She was replanting the climbing Eden rose, the same variety Aunt Margot Bellamy had given her for her birthday the year before. When she handed it over, Aunt Margot had tilted her head with a smile, half teasing, half serious. This rose climbs to places people think it can't reach, just like you. Catherine had only laughed at the time, not thinking much of it. But when the phone in her shirt pocket buzzed 3 times in a row, she knew something was wrong. Still wearing her dirt-streaked gloves, she picked up. Miss Catherine Hayes, this is Charles Lang, personal attorney for Mrs. Margot Bellamy. I'm sorry to inform you, she passed away last night. Catherine couldn't speak. Her heart stopped. The wind, the birds, the entire garden seemed to fall silent, frozen. Aunt Margot, the woman who taught her to read, who taught her to stand tall when the world tried to make her small, was now just a name in a lawyer's statement. Before she passed, Mrs. Margot left you a handwritten letter and one special request. A request, Catherine whispered. There's a second letter. She wanted you to read it aloud and clearly in front of the entire family at the upcoming funeral. In Catherine's hand, a rose she had just planted rested gently in the soil, soft, delicate, but the lawyer's words pierced like a thorn straight through her chest. A letter. In front of the whole family, Aunt Margot had never done anything without a reason, and Catherine could feel it in her bones. What lay ahead wasn't just grief. It was an earthquake named truth. I'll be there within the hour, Catherine told the lawyer. Catherine had never imagined she'd be the chosen one for anything involving the Bellamy family. She was the name barely mentioned at family gatherings, the one who always sat at the far edge of the dinner table, often overlooked in every conversation about the future of the family. And yet, here she was, sitting in the office of Charles Lang, Aunt Margot's longtime attorney, staring at a thick envelope with the familiar handwriting of the woman who had raised her with quiet tenderness and unwavering belief. Mrs. Margot left you a letter, along with a special task. Charles said, his voice low, as if weighing every word. And only you are permitted to know about it before the funeral. Catherine opened the letter. The slanted handwriting appeared instantly recognizable, accompanied by the faint scent of Margot's favorite perfume. My dearest Kathy, if you're reading this, it means I've already left this world, and I've entrusted you not just with wealth, but with responsibility, a burden I've never placed on anyone else, because only you truly understand what is right. Inside the old study safe, there is a second letter containing a truth that has been buried for nearly 4 decades. The code is the day you were truly born, not the one on the certificate, but the day you came to know yourself. Catherine's heart stopped. She remembered that winter night when she was 14, when Aunt Margot, in a gentle voice, told her that the birth date on her certificate was merely a safe solution during a time when adults were forced to make impossible choices. Catherine had never pressed for more. Now it all came rushing back like a song that had once been abruptly cut off. She wanted you to read that second letter in front of the entire family at the funeral, Charles added. That's the condition for you to receive the full estate totaling $89 million. Catherine fell silent, eyes drifting to the window. Family. The very people who had dismissed her, denied her, acted like she didn't exist. Now she was being asked to stand before them, not to earn their acceptance, but to reveal a secret they might have long chosen to forget. The fortune Aunt Margot left behind wasn't a gift. It was the price of truth. Catherine wasn't just an heir. She was the keeper of exposure. And the name Catherine Hayes, once labeled the outsider, now sat at the center of a coming reckoning. 2 days later, Catherine arrived at Hawthorne Manor, the Bellamy family's ancestral estate, a place that had been both dream and nightmare throughout her childhood. The house, draped in moss, still held its stained glass windows, glowing with the faint magic of the Victorian era. But today, the only thing cloaking Catherine was a cold, unnerving silence. Aunt Margot's study was at the end of the second-floor hallway, a place once strictly off-limits to the family's children. Catherine stepped inside. The familiar scent of rosewater mingled with oak and aged paper, tightening something deep in her chest. The bookshelves were untouched. She closed her eyes, recalling the rare moments she'd sat in the plush armchair, while Aunt Margot read Sherlock Holmes aloud, softly laughing as she taught her how to break down every clue. The best hidden secrets, Margot once told her, are the ones disguised as routine. Catherine began to search. Behind the crooked painting of the Garden of Time, a small scratch was visible. She gently pressed her fingertip against it, and the wall clicked open with a soft pop, revealing an old dust-covered safe. She inhaled deeply and typed in the combination, her real birth date. A sharp click. The safe opened. Inside were stacks of documents, a thick envelope filled with old photographs, audio recordings, handwritten letters, and just as promised, the second letter clearly labeled to be read only at the funeral in front of the entire family. Catherine tucked everything into her bag. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, but because the truth had never been so clear. That evening, the phone started ringing nonstop. First came her father, the man who had only called in the last 10 years when he needed something. Kathy, I heard you've been chosen or something. You know, with an inheritance that size comes a lot of responsibility. I haven't decided anything, Catherine said firmly. Just don't do anything reckless. Family lasts forever. Reputation can vanish overnight. Then came Aunt Ruth, then Chloe, even distant relatives who hadn't spoken to Catherine in a decade. Her phone lit up with messages like a dam bursting. Heard you were the first one contacted. Hope you're wise enough not to stir the pot. Chloe's always been the one to carry the family. We all count on her. I know Margot loved you, but maybe she let her emotions get the better of her. Catherine didn't respond. She silenced the phone, disabled all notifications. At that moment, there was no room left for doubt. She had seen the truth. She understood now why Margot hadn't chosen someone the family deemed worthy. Because the truly worthy aren't born into power. They're the ones willing to challenge it when it needs to be confronted. That night, Catherine sat at the old desk in the study, reopening the files. Under the lamplight, Margot's handwriting seemed to come alive. Kathy, you're not a fighter by nature, but some battles are written into us before we even know who we are. So if you choose to stand, do not bow. She needed no more advice. The second letter would be read, and once it was, no one in the Bellamy family would remain seated. The funeral unfolded with solemn dignity, but inside Catherine, a storm was brewing. They had no idea what was coming. They still believed this was a memorial for a powerful, respectable woman. But for Catherine, today wasn't just a farewell. Today was the day the truth would be spoken. After the main service, the priest invited a family representative to speak. From the back, Attorney Charles Lang stepped forward and nodded to Catherine. Miss Catherine Hayes, please. She walked to the podium, holding a thick envelope sealed with wax, the Bellamy family crest embossed on it. Hundreds of eyes followed her. Most were relatives, some business partners, politicians, and members of the press. They were all waiting, but they had no idea. She took a deep breath. Before she passed Mrs. Margot Bellamy, my aunt left me a letter with a specific request. She asked that I read it here today in front of the entire family and everyone who knew her. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Aunt Ruth raised an eyebrow. Chloe sipped water, trying to mask her skepticism. Her father, Howard, sat upright, half alert, half angry. Carefully, Catherine broke the wax seal, opened the envelope, and began to read. My name is Margot Bellamy, and if you're hearing this, I am no longer here. But before I leave this world, there's one last thing I must do, tell the truth, gasps. But she continued, the truth about the death of my brother, Philip Bellamy, the man for whom we held a quiet funeral in 1993 after being told he died in a mountain climbing accident. She held up the first photo, Philip and Margot smiling, holding the founding agreement of Bellamy Holdings. But it wasn't an accident. More sharp breaths. Her eyes locked on her father's. The harness on Philip's climbing gear had been cut. I hired a private investigator, and he discovered the truth. But by then, the case had been closed, and no one wanted to listen. She turned to the next page. Right before Philip's death, a file was submitted transferring all his shares to the Bellamy Family Trust. The paperwork bore his signature, but I knew it wasn't his. I had it analyzed. The results were irrefutable. It was forged. At that moment, her father's face went pale. Chloe set her glass down, her hand trembling. Catherine saw Aunt Ruth lean toward her father, whispering something. She raised her voice. The person who filed the documents, Howard Bellamy, the legal witness on record, Ruth Bellamy. They didn't just know the truth, they helped bury it. Aunt Ruth jumped to her feet. You're insane, Catherine. You're destroying this family. Catherine stared directly at her. I'm doing what Aunt Margot wished she had the courage to do long ago. She placed a USB drive on the podium. This contains a recording between the two of them, captured last year when Margot began revisiting the ownership files. She pressed play, her father's voice low and cold. If Margot reopens this, we'll lose everything. Not just the name, everything. Then, Aunt Ruth's voice, she won't dare. She knows better. And by then, Margot won't be around much longer anyway. Silence fell over the room like a winter frost. A few guests quietly raised their phones to record. Her father lowered his gaze. Aunt Ruth sank back into her seat. Taking another deep breath, Catherine returned to the letter and continued reading. I didn't speak up sooner because I knew if the truth surfaced while Bellamy Holdings was still fragile, hundreds of people would lose their jobs, dozens of families would lose their livelihood. I stayed silent until the company was strong enough, until the truth when revealed would not destroy but renew. Now, Catherine, my niece is the only one I trust to see this through, because she owes nothing to this family, because she is the only one who has never bowed to power or reputation. When she finished, she looked up. I've done what she asked of me. No applause, no protests, just a silence, heavy and full. A few moments later, Charles Lang stepped back to the podium. According to the legal will of Mrs. Margot Bellamy, her entire 47% share in Bellamy Holdings will be transferred to Catherine Hayes. Her personal estate will also be granted in full. Her father quietly stood and left the service. Catherine remained alone in the rose garden Margot once tended. The petals swayed gently as if whispering secrets. Truth at last had bloomed, and she was the one who had bled into the soil to make it grow. After that explosive funeral, no one looked at the Bellamy family the same way again. Howard Bellamy, once the steely-eyed executive with an unshakable grip on power, vanished from public life. He was admitted to a psychological recovery center in Vermont, where the calls became less frequent until they stopped entirely. Ruth Bellamy, the sharp-tongued aunt who had long operated from the shadows of power, quietly sold her suburban estate and withdrew from all social circles. Neither offered an explanation. They didn't need to. Their silence was confession enough. As for the company, Bellamy Holdings, many in the financial world had bet on its collapse after the scandal, but it didn't fall because its true foundation had never been the lies that were hidden. It was the long-term vision Margot Bellamy had quietly and deliberately planted. She hadn't built an empire, she built a philosophy, one of sustainable growth, of social responsibility, and of putting people, not profit, at the center of every decision. Now Catherine Hayes, the niece once dismissed by her own family, had become the one to carry that legacy forward. Catherine didn't change Bellamy Holdings overnight. She didn't arrive with the air of a victor. Instead, she moved quietly through each department, listened to employees, reviewed every document, met with longtime vendors. She sought out the core values Margot had once instilled and began restoring them like tending to an abandoned garden. Her first initiative wasn't a financial restructuring. It was the launch of the Philip Bellamy Scholarship, a belated apology to the uncle the family had tried to erase. She also partnered with Sarah Bennett's nonprofit, the daughter of one of the company's original long-hidden co-founders, to build a green technology center in their hometown. In the office that once belonged to Margot, now her own Catherine rehung a faded black and white photo, Margot and Philip hand in hand, smiling on a half-finished construction site. Beneath it, she inscribed a line in soft brown ink. We cannot change the past, but we can do what's right for the future. And that was where the healing began, not with triumph, but with the courage to rebuild through truth. 1 year after the funeral, Catherine Hayes was no longer referred to as the heir of Margot Bellamy. She had become something else, a builder. Under Catherine's leadership, Bellamy Holdings no longer chased numbers, but pursued values. The revenue reports were still there, but now they came alongside metrics on social impact, transparency, and employee satisfaction. She didn't try to become a second Margot. Instead, she kept what was right and had the courage to dismantle what was outdated. Rather than continue building walls of prestige, Catherine chose to build bridges of connection. On the wall of the main conference room, she hung one of Margot's old quotes, but for the first time, it was made visible to the entire company. Truth can hurt us, but if we dare to face it, it can also become the root of healing. In the soft evening light, Catherine often walked through the rose garden. The same roses Margot once tended, now bloomed again, no longer for show, but as quiet reminders. The most beautiful things are often nurtured through quiet effort and unwavering kindness. One late evening, while sorting through keepsakes in Margot's old office, Catherine found a folded, time-worn piece of paper tucked inside the back cover of a leather notebook. The handwriting was simple, unembellished. Catherine, if you're reading this, then I was right to believe in you. Don't fear the truth. Use it to build what neither Philip nor I ever had the chance to. Catherine smiled, not because she had reached the finish line, but because at last she had begun exactly where she needed to, with the truth and with her truest self. Not everyone born into a family truly belongs to it, but sometimes the one who's most overlooked is the one who changes everything. The truth can be buried for decades, but all it takes is one person brave enough to speak it, and it can light up an entire generation. Catherine's story isn't just a family tragedy. It's a reminder that justice doesn't always wear a robe or carry a gavel. Sometimes it comes from a woman standing alone at a funeral with a letter in her hand and the truth in her heart. If this story moved, you don't forget to follow Tales of Quiet Rage, where we share journeys of quiet but unshakable strength. Because some storms don't roar, they rise, with someone who refuses to bow.